Hey everyone, Mallory here, and welcome to our second episode of Viive Values. So excited for our guest, Andrew Sheppard, today. We're just gonna wait for him to come on board here. I'm just gonna send him a little invite, and then hopefully we can get going. I hope that everyone and the do's and don'ts around having that money come into our lives, sometimes expectedly, sometimes quite unexpectedly as well. So, I think he's coming. Hey, Andrew.
Hey. Hi,
Hey,
Mallory.
how are you doing?
Very good.
Good. Thank you
Yes.
so much for joining us today.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm honored to be your second guest on your IG
Second.
live series. Yeah, it's a
Oh
big
my
deal.
God. I know. I'm so excited. I'm just going to turn up my volume here so I can hear your beautiful voice a bit better. So I was just saying in the live that this is our second episode, as you said, and today we're going to be talking with you all about inheritances, the do's and don'ts. So before we dive into all those questions, let me just say a little bit about Andrew and the top-notch guy that he is. So Andrew Sheppard is the managing director and senior advisor at Flatiron Wealth Management, which is based in downtown Toronto in the absolutely beautiful Flatiron building. It was such a pleasure to go there a couple times. He's also an associate portfolio manager with Q Wealth. Andrew is an industry leader and a recognized advisor who has owned businesses in Canada and abroad. And he truly believes in the mantra that it is not what you make, but what you keep. I like that. I actually wrote that on a Post-it when I read it, Andrew. His financial planning philosophy is rooted in finding efficiencies through cash flow management, automation, and tax minimization. Andrew is married to a Kiwi and they have 3 children. He loves playing music and traveling, and we're going to need to talk about this further. Watching guilty pleasure TV shows. My goodness, we might need our own Instagram live just about that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's not as exciting as you think. It's
No?
really
Okay,
not.
all
No,
right.
not at all.
All right. Well, next
Yeah.
time we're together, we're going to have to dive into that.
Yeah.
But for the people who are watching, let's jump into this topic because I know that you and I are both really passionate about it. So we're probably going to have a good time here. So we're going to talk about inheritances. So let's imagine that someone comes into quite a large sum of money, whether they were expecting it or they were not expecting it. So we're going to talk about the do's and the don'ts. So let's start with the don'ts. Now, all of a sudden I get this big fat check delivered to me. What should I not be doing when I get that?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that the distinction, though, that I'd want to make is depending on what financial situation the person is before they inherit the money.
Yeah.
Because if somebody has has quite a large investment portfolio, let's say they have $2 million of investable assets and they inherit $500,000, that's significant, but most likely they have a plan, they're working with a team. And so I don't know if that's necessarily the group that I'd want to give direct the advice to right now. Because
Sure.
really where I'm finding it's a much more significant impact is when people are doing well and they're making their contributions and they're accumulating some wealth towards their retirement or their RESP for their kids, but all of a sudden their parents pass away and they're inheriting $3 million, $4 million. Like, this is not uncommon. And so
Right.
that's a really, really massive impact. It's a completely different way of thinking. Different strategies are required. So I think that the first thing that I would give advice to people around inheriting money, number one, is don't ignore it. And some people might do that because they feel guilty. There's a lot
Right.
of emotions wrapped up in inheriting money. And so because of that, people just might want to push it away and say, it's not really my money. And just not have a plan for it. So I wouldn't recommend doing that. I think that at some point you need to deal with it. I think also trying to manage it by yourself. To be quite honest with you, there's a lot to know about. So there's legal issues, there's tax issues, there's investment portfolio selection. There's a lot of moving parts. And so to try to do by yourself, I think can be very overwhelming for the majority of people. And then I also think that the last don't that I would mention would be, don't think that the strategies that you've used up to this point don't at the very least need to be tweaked. Like, they might actually have to be completely overhauled. But
Yeah.
at least there's some tweaking, meaning what got you here is not going to get you there. And so I think that these are the common things, like the mindsets that people are in, because they don't know what to do. And they're like, well, it's not going to change me. It's not going to change anything, right? And some people might even have feelings about what that means. Like, now I have $4 million. well, I had an idea of what those people were like, and now I'm one of those people,
Yeah.
and I don't know how to reconcile that. And so it can
Mhm.
lead to these behaviors. And so those would be the things that I'd probably highlight for the don'ts.
I think that's great. And I think we're going to see that a lot with this largest wealth transfer that's coming, that's already kind of starting to happen, but we continue to happen, is that we have a lot of, shall we say, very, middle income people, right? Whose parents die. And all of a sudden, because their parents own this home and this real estate market we're in now, they're inheriting millions. And they were used to, working their job, being able to pay their mortgage, maybe taking a vacation or two a year, but not necessarily having just cash assets sitting around being able to do something with or invest. So it will be quite a shock. And a lot of times when we inherit money, because yes, sometimes it is gifted in life, but most times I'd say it's probably gifted in death. There's so much grief and feelings wrapped up in that money coming to us, because for the majority of people, we're getting that money because our parents died. So that there's so much wrapped up in that. And I even know some people that inherited money and did just sort of sit on it like it was in a checking account, and it made me uncomfortable every day knowing it was there. Not just because it could earn more. It's more just that it need large sums of money in a way almost need protection, right? Like they shouldn't just be sitting there. So I think those are some great don'ts. Good starting point. Now, let's say again that big fat check gets dropped in front of me. What are things that I should be doing? And what are the questions I should be asking myself when that inheritance comes in?
Yeah, that's a good. So the other side of it is I think that the proactive do's that people who inherit money should be doing would be making sure that they've got the appropriate team. So I just talked about how doing it by yourself is probably not a smart idea. So then the question is, well, who do I have? Like, what type of team do I need?
Yes.
And so I think so. I'm a financial planner and a financial advisor, and so I'm biased to say that I think that the first priority is to find a financial advisor who has experience dealing with inheritances, with large sums of money coming in. Meaning, not every financial advisor has this experience, so they wouldn't necessarily have the expertise, because it's not necessarily a hard skill. There are some soft skills that are involved as well. And so I think that finding the right financial advisor is really important. And then also making sure that you've got the right accountant, making sure that you've got the right lawyer, and that the team is able to talk with each other. So it's not up to you to try to quarterback the different conversations, because these are all like, there will be legal issues that need to be addressed. There will be accounting issues, of course, that need to be addressed, and there will be financial planning issues and investment issues as well. And they need to be coordinated, especially when you're dealing with larger sums of money. It has a much larger impact. So I think that is the recommendation, is to make sure that you've got the right team, and that you trust them, and that you understand how they're going to be able to give you coordinated advice. And then the next part of it is, when you are working with a certified financial planner, with a CFP, and you create the plan, that person is going to be able to identify some of the stakeholders that you want to consider, because you might have children, grandchildren, you might have adult dependent children that you want to make sure are taken care of. So you're talking about isolating goals for yourself, for your immediate family, and then for the community at large. Meaning, do you have goals to make an impact beyond your family? And what's the smartest way to do that? And so I think that those are really positive conversations that somebody can help flesh out through the financial planning process. So I think that that's honestly like the number one thing, is just start the process of engaging and start having those conversations. You probably want to talk to 3 or 4 financial advisors, right? Like you just don't want to necessarily go with the first person you chat with. And those are the questions I'd ask. Would be, do you have a team that you can refer me to? Or, I have a great accountant. Are you comfortable working with my accountant? Those are really important questions to ask. Not necessarily, some people are asking, fees are important, and investment philosophy is important as well. But when you're looking to have this coordinated strategy for your portfolio, I think that those are key questions that sometimes people leave out.
Oh, completely. And something I noticed when I was in the legal industry is that for some reason, if we aren't in the legal, financial, or tax industry ourselves, we seem to put people in those industries above us. We put them up on these pedestals, and we forget that at the end of the day, they're working for us, and we need to be happy with them. And I know, personally, my CFP that I've worked with since I was 21, she was the 3rd person who knew I was pregnant. Like, that was the level of intimacy that we have formed together, because to me, I was like, I'm pregnant. how exciting. I'll tell my husband, oh my God, how are we gonna pay for this? And like I immediately called her, right? Like people before family, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that having that sort of, maybe you don't have to share such intimate secrets with your financial planner, but you know, for me, I had that level of trust. I knew that I could call her, that A, she'd calm me down, but B, she'd be like, great, okay, let's start thinking about how we might change things and what we have set up right now. And I think that it's important for people to really advocate for the type of personality that they want in a service provider. Just because you don't get along with someone doesn't mean they're not great at their job. They might be, but they might be better at their job with person X over there as opposed to you. So really advocating for what's best for you is really key. And then finding that team, as you said. And another point that I love that you made is that it's up to that team to communicate with each other. I mean, that's something we see a lot at Viive is service providers just doing their thing out in the ether and never coming together. And that's really key. And I know that's something that you guys really focus on at Flatiron as well, is making sure that the team that your client has is communicating well together.
Yeah, no, it's really an important part of it, because asking the client to sit in on 3 different meetings, 3 different professionals speaking 3 different languages, really, right? And then trying to translate and communicate. So so I think that those are really important aspects. That's great.
So since we're kind of talking to people who aren't necessarily used to having large sums of money, you know, I feel like if I go to a dinner party with my friends, if we start talking about money, we mention TFSAs, RSPs, maybe if we have kids, RESPs, you know, that might be the extent of like the acronyms that we understand in the world, right? But if all of a sudden any of us came into large sums of money, it would be potentially a different playing field, right? There's more investment opportunities, more products available to us that we just don't even know about. So even though I know we don't have a specific number in mind or whatnot, are there products or different things or categories that people invest in who have larger sums of money, so that if people do come into that, they go in with a little bit more knowledge?
Yeah, that's again a really good question, and I think it's one that a lot of people, when they come into a lot of money, that is an assumption they make. It's like, okay, so now what do I do? Meaning, I'm not just going to buy a mutual fund, right? Am I just buying a mutual fund? Is that and so what I would say is that again, in this situation, working with the right advisor who has access to the widest range of investments is going to be something that you're looking for. Meaning, if you're limited to somebody who is a mutual fund salesperson, all they can do is offer you the mutual funds. And mutual funds serve a great purpose, and they are, and they could still make up a part of your portfolio. But you also want somebody who has experience, just at least understanding what the options are in different spaces. So exchange traded funds, ETFs, individual stocks and bonds. And then there's a whole alternative space that you need to work with, like through Q Wealth. I'm an associate portfolio manager, and I'm really fortunate to work with a strong portfolio management team who's putting together investment opportunities that you just don't have access to outside of working with somebody with Q Wealth. And so that could really offer some significant strategies to reduce volatility. It might offer better returns for you, and using them in different accounts can absolutely have a massive impact. So I think that again, so I sound like a broken record because I'm saying find the right person to work with, but I think that these are great questions to ask. Is like, it doesn't mean I'm going to use every investment at all. It just means I have the access, I can do the due diligence, and I'm not leaving anything on the table because I can't do it or I don't know about it. And I think that that's something that you should be looking for in an advisor that you're working with. But other than that, when you're looking at, once you have access to all of those, the determination of what investments to use really depends on your time horizon and your risk tolerance. So risk tolerance is so important because before, maybe you didn't really care that much about volatility up and down because, well, you're contributing, and when it's down, I'm buying it on sale, and when it's up, I'm happy because the number's higher. But if you have $4 million and the market corrects 10%, which is not, I mean, that can happen in 3 months. Like that is not an uncommon correction of 10%. You're on paper, you're down $400,000. Are you okay with that? Like, is that something exactly? Like all of a sudden you're like, wait a second, I'm not okay with it. And it's on paper. Yeah. So being able to have that conversation with an advisor who can say, we're doing the risk tolerance questionnaire, and these are not just kind of like it's a real conversation. It's not just ticking a box. It's saying, how are you going to react when the market corrects even more than that? Like, and it just amplifies, right? So, and even if you have $1 million, you've inherited $1 million. I mean, $100,000 drop. You may never have even had $100,000 drop. You may never have had that much up to this point. So that's like, what just happened?
Yeah.
So I think so your risk tolerance it's a completely different conversation. So working with an advisor again who can navigate that conversation and make sure that you're actually capturing that you're actually in the right portfolio for your stomach. Some people might be fine. They're like, yeah, I get it. That's how it goes. Yeah. But it's really important to have that conversation. And the other is time horizon. So why an inheritance might impact your time horizon is because you may be able to adjust your retirement date. Like it might be that a significant enough inheritance where you say, you know what, I would love to, if I could retire at 60, maybe I will do that, or even earlier. And so then you would definitely want to make sure that you're investing in a way where that money is going to be available for you. You may also want to give gifts to other people. So if you say, I've had clients who have wanted to give specific amounts to children on specific dates. So then we would want to earmark that, make sure it's safe and it's completely separate from the rest of the portfolio. And then there's all the other things that you want to talk about, like maybe there's a golf club that you've always wanted to join, and now can I do it? Like, is that okay for me to do that? These are the types of conversations, right? Or maybe I want to go on these 5 vacations. These are my 5 dream vacations. What does that look like? Yeah. So it's not just a one size fits all for the portfolio. It's really earmarking the life events that we want to prioritize and making sure the appropriate investments are being used for them.
Yes, this is something I say to my millennial clients and friends a lot, is I find that there's kind of a pullback happening in that generation. We're not wanting to use our parents' lawyers and accountants and advisors and stuff like that. We're trying to do things independently on our own. And, I always say to people, that's great that you want to be informed, that you want to be involved in the process of planning for your life and planning for your financial future. But at the same time, there's just so much that we don't have time to learn because we have other jobs and we have other things going on. And I mean, just the amount of things you were listing there, I was like, I maybe know 20% of what you just said, right? So it's really incredible how much there is in this industry that if you don't have a large amount of cash assets to invest, you just don't know about. And even if you do, I think there's a lot of ignorance, particularly in younger generations, because we aren't dealing with these financial professionals as often. So I think it's great that you're able to articulate that and explain that there is such a wealth, there's a little pun word there, wealth of opportunities if we do inherit money from older generations in our future. So that was great. Now, let's go to the topic that no one really wants to think about, which is tax implications. No one wants to do that. We want to pay as minimal tax as possible. Whenever I have clients come my way, they basically want to know how to keep their family from fighting and how to pay as little tax as possible. Yeah. So, I mean, when people inherit money, and when they start investing that money that they inherited, what sort of tax implications are they looking at? And how do you, in the role that you have, support them through that and work with accountants in that process as well?
Yeah, in Canada, we actually do not have an inheritance tax. Right. So when you receive money from an inheritance, these are after-tax dollars. But it is a question that everybody asks. So I'm glad that you asked it. Yes. and it's because, and I think it's because there's only 6 states in America that actually have an inheritance tax. And so if you have ties to those states, you can look them up on Google. I'm not an expert on that. So you should definitely, if you have ties to those states and it does impact you, you should be working with an accountant that has cross-border, that's able to deal with cross-border tax issues. But in Canada, we do not have an inheritance tax. So all of the tax on an estate happens at the estate level, meaning when somebody passes away, everything is crystallized. So all assets are deemed disposed of, and then that tax bill is due. Yes. And so by the time you've received it, it is tax-free, which there's some great opportunities with that, because if you did want to gift right then you have it's a tax-free amount that you'd be able to gift out, like it's an after tax, and then that person wouldn't have to pay tax on it. So there could be some strategy around that. And then after that, you have the opportunity to use it in various different ways. So all the vehicles, and you've listed some of them, meaning if it makes sense for you to use it in your RSP or TFSAs, or just using a non-registered account. And then again, when you're using a non-registered account, because there's no special tax treatment, it's called a non-registered because it's not registered with the government to receive special tax treatment. that's when you can work again with an investment advisor has the opportunity to use a wide range of investment vehicles, because there are some extremely tax efficient ways to invest in essentially the same portfolios you might get in a mutual fund, but be able to withdraw it much more tax efficiently. So that ties into the mantra, which is, it does not matter what you make. You can show me your net worth before you've paid taxes on it. It doesn't matter. It's what ends up in your pocket. And so that's where that coordination with your accountant becomes really important, right? So as a financial planner, as the investment manager, these are the recommendations I'm making. Does this line up with you? We get some sign off from the accountant, and that's where you can save considerable money, like a lot of money in taxes.
Nice, nice. Now, last question, and then I'll let you go and have your lunch. So this is something I talk with my younger clients about a lot, is that they come in and maybe they're already working with a financial planner, maybe they're not. Then they say, you know, I'm not worried about retirement because I'm going to inherit all this money from my mom when she dies, or from my dad. Right? And they're counting on that inheritance to come in. And I go on and I espouse about the fact that people are living longer. You have no idea how much of that money your parents are going to use up. You really have no idea what's coming down the line. So do you think that there's any kind of situation where people should rely on that money coming in when they're doing their own financial and retirement planning? Or do you think that you should always sort of think of it as just this bonus that maybe shows up one day?
Yeah, I tend to agree with you. I mean, we never include an inheritance in a financial plan.
Yeah.
Just because as you said, you don't know. People are living longer. The cost of care is getting ridiculous. Like after-tax dollars, it can deplete the largest portfolios in a matter of years, right? And you just don't know. And so I think so we never include it in the plan, like meaning we expect around this date that you would receive this much. Having said that, I think it's really important to talk about it, because that's the other side where people just don't want to talk about it. But then it's like, well, how are your parents? That's always a question I ask all of my clients. How are your parents doing?
Yeah.
And because are you the executor? I want to know if you're named in any wills, if you're the executor on any wills, right? So because this it plays a big part in their financial plan.
Yes.
And then discuss, if you do have visibility, are your parents going to be okay? Because sometimes we're not worried about what the inheritance is going to be. It's going to be, are they going to run out of money and I'm going to have to start supplementing their care? So that's a big question, right? Like, how are we going to make sure that that's part of the plan? So it's a bigger conversation than just like, well, I should be receiving 500,000 or whatever they've done some math in their head, right?
Yeah.
So the only time that I would say, okay, so then having said that though, if the client, we do a base plan, these are the assumptions, these are the strategies, and we set out the goals. We can always run a scenario if you're interested to see what the impact of a lump sum amount of money coming in 10 years would be, right? But that's like an alternative scenario, just so that because they're like, I was wondering, and that's fine. You can wonder. It's okay to wonder what that's going to look like, right? It's just not a good idea to count on it. The only time that I have is sometimes you have a situation where a parent is in full-time care. Their ability to carry out the activities of daily living, right? So they need full-time care, and let's say they have a pension that is more than covering their cost, and then they've sold their house and there is an investment. And in that case, it's not uncommon that I'm actually helping them manage that on behalf of their parents.
Right.
Then again, like, we're not building it into the plan, but we actually have pretty clear information. Like we can guess that it may actually be $3.5-4 million. So at that point, it's probably realistic to start having that conversation, just to say, okay, cash flow is fine. Your mom's taken care of. There is this money sitting here. What is the short-term plan until something happens to her? And then we can start having conversations if they want about what would happen after the fact. And then sometimes too, if they're the power of attorney, they can decide to start doing things, like they have that ability to say, like, it would make sense for us to move this into a joint bank account and start using it for certain things. Like that's they have that ability to start helping their parents in that way. But these are all conversations, ultimately the client's decision as to what they want to see.
Right. That's awesome. Great answer. Well, I want to thank you so much, Andrew, for joining us. It was so great that you came on to our second episode with so much insight into this crazy world of inheriting money and managing that money afterward. I really appreciate your insight and your thoughts today.
Mallory, thank you so much. That was I really enjoyed that conversation.
Awesome.
It was great. Cheers.
Thank you. And for everyone watching, we are going to take a little break over the holidays. We'll be back on Wednesday, January 10th with LaRue Peoples, an incredible estate lawyer from Weirfold. So be sure to come back that day so we can learn a little bit more about last wills and testament. Thanks, everyone, and thanks, Andrew.
Cheers. Thanks, Mallory.
Bye.